Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Most of us try to find a sustainable practice where we don't really encroach on the environment like we have been over the many decades. As a matter of fact, you've heard on the program we've talked about things such as peak oil, so maybe we want to go after the electric car and see how we can reduce our petroleum expenditure. Other people are finding ways that they want to downsize from their large homes as part of the American dream to something that seems more reasonable where we're not enslaved by trying to keep that home going. On the Beyond 50 radio program today is somebody who did just that very thing. She got rid of her $1,200 monthly mortgage that she was paying in Portland, Oregon, scaled down to a house that cost her $10,000 to build at 84 square feet. She reduced her heating and the like down to about $8 a month compared to paying about $600 per month in heating bills when she lived in a larger home, and has had more than 20 million people actually tour her home in a virtual way. The book is The Big Tiny. It's a built-it-myself memoir, and I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program our guest, Dee Williams. Dee, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Oh, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this.
Do you ever have trouble turning around in your home?
Not so far, as long as I don't bulk up. You know, I can't gain any weight.
10 years you've been living in this home here now, 84 square feet. Now, does that seem like it gets a little cramped after a while, or have you gotten pretty used to it?
Oh, it fit when I first built it, and it continues to fit. I haven't ever felt claustrophobic or neurotic. And at least my friends haven't told me that I'm neurotic. So, no, it still fits.
Now, tell us how this all started for you. What was the decision that made you decide, I want to go in this direction with my life rather than the way things had been?
There were actually a couple of things. One is a trip to Guatemala that I took, and you know, if you've ever traveled abroad, you get a dose of reality, how most of the world actually lives in much smaller spaces and with a lot less stuff. So, you know, I took this trip and came home, and my house just didn't, my big house that is, just didn't seem to fit me. And then the other thing that happened shortly after that trip to Guatemala was that I landed in the hospital diagnosed with congestive heart failure. So, you know, I had this pretty horrible diagnosis with what I thought was going to be a much shorter life. And I kind of felt like I wanted to live the life I wanted without my enormous debt and the time sink of, you know, constantly having to repair my house or clean my house. I didn't want to die with a vacuum in my hand. That's the bottom line.
Well, you know, and you think about, too, how the American dream is constantly pitched at us when we get these political pundits that want to run for president. It's the same story. You want to get that house. You want to get your child's education paid for. You know, all this stuff. And I'm starting to wonder, have we just kind of lost sight of what the American dream really was?
Well, it's a good question, and I can only speak for myself in that, you know, I think I was following along, you know, with trying to achieve a certain career and achieve a certain happiness by owning a home, and I have to say I was happy. It wasn't like I was miserable, but I was a little trapped. You know, I was caught. You know, when it came down to, you know, how do I want to spend my time? It wasn't working all the time, and it wasn't to pay my mortgage, and it wasn't constantly repairing my house. So, you know, I just wanted something different, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat.
I'm sure they are. Now, what has it been like as the people have toured and actually talked to you about your home? What kind of stories come back at you?
Oh, you know, it's funny. I have a lot of people that tell me about, like, the first little tiny apartment that they lived in right out of college, or a place that they lived in, you know, in their youth, or a summer cabin that they love to escape to. So it really conjures up, I think, for a lot of people, a time when they were less encumbered and a lot more liberated and kind of enjoying, taking a bite out of their life the way that they wanted to.
I know. I think what's also interesting about your story is that you really have found that your lifestyle now has really connected you to community. And when you think about how we typically live, especially in the neighborhood I'm in, there's some homes that are worth $500,000, and, the average price is about $300,000, is that we all don't really feel like we talk to one another. We don't really know, what does my neighbor think about this, or what are we going to do about that? We just kind of go about our day, going out, then coming home and just kind of letting cable TV wash away, and then there's those ravenous vacations that we take. But for you, you've really found a way by reducing your work hours to really get involved in what's going on around you.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Is like we all rush about, we don't have time to necessarily chit-chat with our neighbor. And, we're busy. We are very busy people. And so a part of me living in my tiny house is that I can work, the benefit that I have is that I can work part-time and just enough to maintain my health benefit. And then, I've got this other time to be able to kind of help the neighbor. As an example, I helped one neighbor put a French drain in across their yard last winter when we were getting so much rain, and then helped another neighbor build a chicken coop. And, I have this liberty that I think allows me a chance to relax a little bit and enjoy my neighbors differently.
What's interesting about the choice that you made is that, in a way, it was a simple one. I suppose actually engaging in it might have been a little challenging at first, but eventually getting used to the fact that you work about 24 hours a week, as you said, which isn't really a whole lot of time. That can be 2 or 3 days a week, depending. But the fact that you have a lot of time, and I think it's really fascinating that I remember attending a seminar. It was on addictions, and it was said that most people who like to drink a lot tend to do it because they're bored. So people don't tend to know what to do with a lot of their free time. And I think what they need is more of it so they can figure that out.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. The more time you have, the more of an invitation you get to understand yourself and who you are in the world and what the world is. Who are your neighbors and what is nature throwing at you at any given time. So, yeah, it's an awesome invitation to kind of participate in your life differently.
Now, at 84 square feet, you really don't have a whole lot of storage going on there, so I think you probably had to deal with the idea of what's important to keep and what isn't so important to get in the first place.
Oh, yeah. When I was downsizing out of my big house, a big part of downsizing was easy. It's easy to get rid of garden hoses and, the lawnmower and, that kind of stuff.
Get a goat.
Kitchen gadgets that I'd never used anyway. That was easy. I think the harder part was trying to go through my memorabilia, the old love letters. Yes, I do have a couple. And old, just tchotchkes, things that my mother had given me or my siblings had given me or old friends had given me, that were, important to me. And trying to figure out what to do with those kinds of things was really grueling. I also had a hard time getting rid of books. I had a lot of books, and I love books. So it was challenging for me to, I ended up loading up my car and taking a stack of books over to Powell's used books and getting rid of them that way, or handing some off to friends and hoping that I could visit them regularly.
I know there was a time when I finally had more movies at home than I really wanted to keep on the shelves. I just simply took them to the library and figured if I ever wanted to see them again, they would always be there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant, I say.
It also helped me reduce my movie bill. I remember it was pretty phenomenal when I would actually go and rent movies, and I was like, the library seems to have everything you'd ever need. There's several of them, and you never know what you're going to get. So,
I love the library.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, though, like you said, when you kind of shift, the way you do things to something different, that you actually find, I think, sometimes more abundance than you would have ever thought. Right.
Mm-hmm. I think, as I was going through my stuff in my big house, as a backdrop, I had this notion that, well, if I'm going to kick the bucket, if I'm going to die in the next couple of years because of this heart problem, I don't want somebody else to have to go through all of my stuff. I didn't want to inconvenience somebody having to go through my stuff that I had, piled away in the attic or, chucked down in the basement or stacked up in the garage. So it was like getting shot out of a cannon a little bit as far as going through my stuff. But it really was an exercise in trying to figure out, the difference between what I want and what I need. And that exercise has continued over the years. It doesn't, just because I live with less stuff doesn't mean my appetite has diminished that much. I still go to, as an example, I'll go into REI and really want to get like a whole bunch of new climbing gear, but I don't have any room for it, so I get to borrow.
Now, it's pretty interesting, though, what a person can do with 84 square feet if they just use their imagination, isn't it?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, and you had mentioned having, a limited amount of storage space. I actually have a lot more storage than I need. And, when I designed the house, I designed it so that I would, be able to store lots of books and lots of dishes and, stuff that I thought I couldn't live without after paring down. And yet what I found is that, I didn't really need that stuff. So I actually have a lot of empty space in my little house, and I think that makes it feel bigger.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you decided to do this, you built this home by yourself, correct?
I did, yeah.
Okay. What was that process like for you? Had you had any real experience before in building of any kind or woodworking, anything like that?
Yeah, I had done, like, home remodeling kind of stuff, like enough to get myself in trouble with power tools. And I had done some, mission type work in Mexico, and in Guatemala we helped build a school. So I had been a participant in building, but never been the decision maker in building. So I was the person that would, carry the bag of nails over and hand it to somebody else, as opposed to, when I was building my own house, I was responsible for all of that stuff. And I have to admit, there were mistakes that were made. I glued my hair to the house one day and had to have a friend come rescue me. And, one day as I was putting the rafters on the roof, I screwed them all in place and came down off the roof to go get a cup of coffee and walked over, got my coffee, and on the way back, I looked up and I realized that I had screwed all of the rafters in crooked. So it, the peak of the roof looked like a Nordic ship kind of lunging out into space. So I was able to unscrew and rescrew. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about carpentry while I was building.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is a home you can actually pull behind a truck or something, right?
Yeah. It's heavy. I mean, it weighs a lot, but
right.
I built it on top of a standard utility trailer, and then re-engineered it so that it's kind of integrated into the trailer frame itself, so it's bolted in place.
Now, that cost that I talked about earlier in the program, it was about $10,000 to build a home, but almost a quarter of that was in the solar paneling. So this runs mostly on solar?
Oh, it's all on solar, yeah. So
okay.
I can run my, I don't really have a huge demand as far as my electrical stuff goes. So I have my laptop and a couple of lights and my cell phone to recharge and a giant 72-inch plasma screen TV. Mm-hmm. Kidding.
I can't see how something like that would fit in there.
Yeah.
Unless you laid it, of course, up on the roof somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. So much for inviting people over to the Oscars, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the cool thing. I've become a great guest.
There you go. That's something a lot of us don't get a chance to do we?
Yeah.
I think it's actually funny. Some time ago, we had done a segment on straw houses, where people actually use straw to build houses, and there was a gentleman that was talking about how he still loves his toys, but how you could buy property in which to construct this straw house on for something like $2,000. And I'm thinking, we're all out here, paying up the arm for property taxes and all this, and you think, how much different our lives would be if we would just shift our priorities a little bit. And you wonder how often people chase, again, as I mentioned, the American dream. They do it because their neighbor did it, or that's what I'm supposed to do, without really thinking about what's important to me. Now, in the 10 years that you've been living in this house, how do you think you're different from the way you were about 10 years ago?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think I'm happier, and by that I mean happy in a different way. I've been invited to participate in my community differently. So, as an example, I have to shop every other day for food because I have a small pantry. I don't have a lot of room for storage, and I don't have a refrigerator, so I need to buy produce more often. And so all of a sudden, instead of hoping that the co-op does okay, I really want it to thrive. I'm invested differently. Same with the library, because it's an extension of my own bookshelf. I want it to do really well. And so I have these different relationships that have been developed over the last 10 years. And so I end up feeling a lot more connected. And that makes me feel happier. It makes me feel like I'm a participant in something as opposed to kind of being autonomous and racing off to go to my job for 40 hours a week and then racing home and mowing the grass and fixing the roof and maybe repainting the living room because it's starting to look a little old and tired, and just like me, it's old and tired. So it's like, all of a sudden I think I'm participating different in my life, and that causes me to experience a sense of gratitude and humility a little bit differently, and that makes me happier.
That, and plus you also have what a lot of people wish they were wealthy would have, and that's more time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've got. It's funny when I first finished building my house and I moved it into the spot that I'm still in. I all of a sudden had this sense of like, oh my gosh, this is what people feel when they retire, and they try to figure out how to, what they want to do with all of their extra time, right. and their extra money. I've got very little debt and monthly expenditures, so it's like all of a sudden I can help my niece and nephew get through college. I can loan money to friends and family. I can donate money to different causes, and it all of a sudden I'm a philanthropist in my own tiny little way, and that feels great.
Well, I can imagine that life also becomes very colorful, too, because, I myself have spent time volunteering for different things. Like one of the things was for a food pantry for a place called Neighborhood House. And what really surprised me while I was there was the types of people that were coming there for emergency food boxes. Right. You mostly think of street people, pushing around carts or backpacking and that sort of like. But there were people that were actually coming there from middle-class incomes, and it surprised me to see that and to talk with these people and to hear their stories and to get involved and find, what resources do I know of that I can actually share with them that might help them move in the direction they want to move. So you find yourself in some really interesting places where at the end of the day you actually feel that you've fulfilled something. You really can't put your finger on what it is, but you know that it was like, my life actually meant something today versus just going to work and coming home and paying the bills, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head.
But you didn't use any nails.
Yeah, no. My house is all screwed and glued together.
Screwed and glued. If you screw it and glue it, it's going to hold.
Yeah, it's a lot stronger that way.
I think it's kind of funny. I was reading how you had an impressive resume in goofing off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I feel like, as far as participating in my community differently, I have the luxury of time so that if I'm walking home and I see somebody doing something like unloading lumber off the top of their car or out of the back of their truck, I can go over and offer to help, which usually people will usually say no, and then I'll say, "Are you sure?" And then they'll say, "Okay." And so, I benefited while I was building my house. I had a lot of complete strangers stop by and offer to help me do different things. And so I feel like I'm getting to pay that back a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly a wonderful lifestyle. Do you find that this might be something that people will catch on to and move in that direction? I know it's not for everybody, but, for those who kind of think, that looks interesting, what would you say to them if they consider this, some things that they might want to consider if they decide to move in this direction?
Well, I think a lot of people are reconsidering and rethinking, what is really the American dream. And the American dream, I think, at its root is based on building healthy, sustainable communities, building strong families, and being able to kind of look your neighbor in the eye and help out when you need to help out or ask for help when you need it. And I think that sense of community is very strong, and more people are leaning into that a little bit more and foregoing the idea of needing to yoke themselves to a $500,000 mortgage or, another bigger, better car even. And so it's been really cool to be a part of that discussion. There are people all over the country, and actually in other countries as well, who are rethinking kind of size and space efficiency and energy efficiency and their impact to the environment and in their community. I just got back from Japan helping to teach a workshop on building tiny houses, and you'd think that the people in Japan already got this wired. They already have fairly simple, small structures. But they're interested also in trying to downscale, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I know there was a time I read that people in Japan who live in the city, for instance, literally rent a bed, so to speak, and that's the size of their apartment, and I thought, wow, that's being kind of overly committed to, business, I guess. Yeah,
they do have those, like, hotels that are just essentially like you crawl into a box.
Yeah.
That's your hotel room.
It's like $35,000 or $40,000 a year to rent these things, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I think I'd just rather be a farmer.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky because I was out in the countryside, so I was with the farmers, and I totally enjoyed it. It was a beautiful, beautiful country.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you pay any kind of rent or mortgage or property taxes, anything like that?
I pay rent now. I didn't for years because I was helping to caretake an elderly woman that lived in the house in front of me. So I essentially was living in her backyard, which was also shared with some dear friends of mine. So, we had 3 different households sharing the same backyard, and for that time I was caretaking Rita. I didn't pay rent, but she passed away last year. So after that, I started paying rent to my friends.
Now, I know the other thing I noticed was that you don't have any real running water anywhere. That might be trouble for some people there, especially those who like to take showers.
Oh, I still shower. Don't worry.
I didn't say you didn't. It wasn't right there in the house.
Yeah, I shower at my friend's house or at work or at the gym. But that was probably the biggest adjustment for me. We have a we are in love with our running water here, and we don't have to work very hard for it. And just the fact that we can we feel very entitled to having running water while the rest of the world really struggles with getting water and heating it up and then disposing of it. And if you take a look at the carbon footprint associated with getting running water and then managing the wastewater, it's huge. Mm-hmm. And environmentally, it's one of the greatest things you can do is take a look at how and why you're using the water that you're using. So it was a huge adjustment for me, and sometimes I still complain about it, especially in the winter when I when I get cold and I want to take a shower and warm up at 11 o'clock at night. And instead, I just have to slog off to bed and curl up next to my dog and hope that that's good enough. But I get, I kvetch, I complain, and the cool thing is that it passes. I warm up and I'm fine.
It's so true, having been overseas, about how often and how much we do take for granted some of the things we have, like electricity to the house and of course, running water. You can control the temperature at a moment's notice. You don't have to boil it. And for some reason, while you were describing that, I was thinking about that scene in the movie Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray goes to take the shower, jumps in, and the water's freezing. Of course we don't have hot water today. Oh, yeah, okay, I guess I would have known that. But the fact that we have those kind, like you said, the ability on a cold winter night to maybe go and take a shower to warm up a little bit at 11 o'clock at night, but that isn't something that you would have available, but you kind of put yourself in places where that can be available, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. I'm a great guest.
Right.
So,
I'll cook you dinner if I can use your shower. How does that sound?
You got it. You just got a snapshot of my life. Mm-hmm. I'll cook you dinner if I could take a shower.
Well, very good. I know they'll be very entertained. The book is The Big Tiny, a Built-It-Myself memoir. Our guest today, Dee Williams. Is there a website people can also go on to and take a look at some of the photographs of your home and the like?
Yeah, if they go to padtinyhouses.com, that's P-A-D, tinyhouses.com, they can get more information about my house and other tiny houses that are out there.
Get back to that song, Short People. Dee, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today.
Oh, thank you so much. I wish you all the best. Thank you for an awesome show.
You bet. Thank you again. Again, find out more. The book is The Big Tiny, a Built-It-Myself memoir. Our guest today, Dee Williams. We'll be sure to post something on our website as well at beyond50radio.com. Thank you again for tuning in. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.